fans, to another episode of Donnie's Disposals. I am your host, Coach Donnie Hess, here back with another AFL review. And ladies and gentlemen, it is currently, as I sit at my phone, 5:17 a.m. here in the States, and some news has just dropped that we will talk about a little bit later in the podcast. But we must talk about the first round of finals. Four games have done. Two teams are no longer in the finals. Six teams have still the shot to win a flag. Joining me today to cover the finals, my friend from Code Sports, Mr. Alex Doherty. Alex, thank you for joining me, sir.
Well, I'd like to say I'm from Code Sports, but
Oh shoot,
I'm not.
mongrel punt. Oh my gosh. I am so sorry about that. The mongrel punt.
No, no, that's okay. That's okay. I don't want to take credit for anybody else's work. Good morning to you, Donnie. Good afternoon. Good evening, everybody. Good night, or wherever you're listening. Whenever you're listening, what a cracking weekend in finals. And I tell you what, I've been keeping tabs on this Braden Maynard thing, the tribunal all night practically, and geez, we've had some words off here. I can't wait to divulge in that a little bit later too, Donnie.
It'll be fun. Like I said, I love a good old fashioned debate. As we both kind of said offline, it's the vitriol online that we are going to see after the outcome here is going to be interesting. We both were discussing how Twitter can sometimes have quite the avid reaction when it comes to it. And I said, I have no dog in the fight in this one. I have an opinion. I have an opinion on this. I've tried to stay off Twitter because I know that for some people, an opinion is just a reason for you to get yelled at. So we will not focus on that a little bit. Let's focus on the footy a little bit. We will discuss the Brandon Maynard situation here in just the littlest bit. So let's go to it really quickly, sir. Four games down of the finals. Your thoughts on this, because we had two absolute crackers to start off this finals, and a few not so entertaining ones, unfortunately, as the finals ended this round.
Yeah, look, I think the entire week overall has been a tremendous result for footy. Obviously, you talked on the Thursday, Friday night games, which I think carried about 186,000 people all up, or something around that. It was definitely over 180,000 for the two nights, which is great footy. And then of course the St Kilda GWS game, yeah, very. Look, it sort of kept on it as well. Like as soon as GWS pulled away, it was like, oh, okay, what can St Kilda do? St Kilda, they came back from two deficits, pretty lengthy deficits as well, and Brisbane and Port was good for a little bit there, and then the Lions just went, power wow. So, no, very good first week of finals. I'm very keen for this weekend though. It's going to two cracking games.
Yeah, definitely. And both games, honestly, I think that you just don't know how they're gonna go. So like, you can do like even looking at them tipping, I'm just like, oh, I could see this, I could see this. That'll be very, very fascinating. So let's review what has happened first, and then we'll get to what is going to happen. So we start off with Thursday night as Collingwood survive a scare from Melbourne, 60-53. But the number that I look at, sir, is that 11 behind. I mean, Melbourne had their shot. They just didn't take it.
Yeah, and I think even the more damning stat there is the inside 50 count. I mean, they had
Mhm.
69 to 37, which was 32 plus into the good of the D's. So you sort of got to ask the question, how the hell do you cock it up and still lose when you have that many inside 50 entries? And it sort of goes back to the forward line, which has been sort of a lingering issue with Melbourne all season long. I mean, Fritsch got his two goals, which was great, but the key forwards failed. I mean, Tom McDonald was brought in for the injured Jake Melksham, who had been playing some really good footy up to this point. We won't be seeing him now for the next year. He was very ineffective for a large part of the game, albeit very, in wet conditions, didn't exactly favour any of the tall timbers. And also Van Rooyen was only kept to six disposals. He was pretty ineffective as well. But it just goes to show that you've got to take your opportunities. I mean, as you've said, Melbourne had more scoring opportunities. Collingwood, when they got the ball in transition, yeah, Bobby Hill was just terrific. Probably one of his better games this year, I must say. 3 goals, one, and so clean with a greasy ball. So yeah, there's that, and good to see Dan McStay get up as well after copping one on the chin from Van Roy, and probably gets overlooked a fair bit in the wake of the Maynard Brayshaw incident. But I thought
Hmm.
that was probably more of a disgraceful act than the Maynard one. But that's my take on it. She
Hmm.
probably should have got 2 weeks, not 1 week. But yeah, good win to the Pies.
Yeah, it was definitely one of those where I think the vitriol again, whether on what side of the particular aisle you sit on when it comes to it on that. I agree. Again, can you really tell was the elbow intentional? You could make many an argument by the vision that it was, so which is difficult because you would think that these guys respect and understand that. So that one was hard. I probably agree with you. It probably should have been a second week, but I think they go the old adage finals games are more important, so we can't do it. So so we'll just do one. And I'm just like, you want to stamp out
Uh,
stuff. I understand finals are very important. I really get that, but you can't make that delineation because all you're doing is telling them that, hey, finals, you can get away with a little bit more because we know that they're super important. So that I think that's the frustrating part. But just I'm looking at it. Just I mean, Melbourne never led in this game. They never even had a shot, and it just the fact that it was like the fourth quarter they ran it was very odd seeing Collingwood in the fourth quarter get absolutely literally they were holding on for their lives there for a bit. If one of these goals here, the a couple of rush behinds here, and no, Tom McDonald had one. It's like one of those goes through. This could have been a different result, which is scary to think that Collingwood this entire season has been kind of the measuring stick of the entire competition. But the D's just they have their opportunity. They just could not put it away, unfortunately. So.
Yeah, no, that's it, and it's also sort of we got to talk about Melbourne's first quarter as well. I mean, Collingwood kicked
Hmm.
4 goals to 1, and they just sort of looked like they just could not get their hands on the ball. And even when sort of Brayshaw got stretched off, they still sort of it was a bit of a stagnated affair for a little bit because everyone started getting into one another. Not none more so than Jack Viney, but after that, Collingwood still were a bit even heading into the second quarter. They got the first goal the second term, and then Melbourne started to wrangle the momentum back in their favour, but they just couldn't capitalise on their inside 50 opportunities.
Hmm. Yeah, so it was just this was one of those games that I watched it a little bit. It was almost got a little bit frustrated because this so many missed opportunities. This was not the D's that I was expecting, and the worst part is the fact that with the Van Royen injury, it's like who comes in? Do we see the vaunted Brody Grundy come back, make an appearance in the finals? Or do they go another way? So it'll be very fascinating to see how the D's handle this. So let's jump over to the game that I don't want to talk about, but we got to talk about because almost
We
a eerie carbon copy of the night before as Carlton roar out to an early lead. Sydney stays in it, crawls back into it, gets to the fourth quarter, and again, they just could not find the center sticks, and they fall to the Carlton Blues, giving the Blues their first win in finals in over a decade, 74-68. And as a Swans fan, I'll put my red hat on for just a little bit. I'm more upset because 9-14 behinds kicked, and this was only a 6-point game. Just one of those gives us extra time. Two of us gives the Swans a surviving win. But I mean, I got to give it to it. The Blues and all, they won this game. They were the much better footy team all in all. And now the discussion comes, can Carlton actually get better with Harry Mackay going out? Which I'm on the side of I kind of think that they are, which is really interesting. Your thoughts?
Well, they certainly can't get any worse without him the team. I mean, gee whiz, he shinned one from the goal square into the goalpost, and then one from probably a little bit further out, let's say 20 meters out, and
Mhm.
still manages to shank it. So I don't know if you can get any worse than that. But look, it certainly opens up the door for a Jack Silvani type to come back in and just play as a role to sort of keep out Charlie Curnow.
Mhm.
That was this was a hell of a game. You're right. It was almost like a carbon copy in some respects, and just even being there live it was just an unreal feeling. Even before you do even before the game, they do the national anthem and they do the welcome to country now. And I'm sort of looking around, I'm thinking, gee whiz, this is almost like 95,000 we've got here in the house at the MCG, and it was just unreal. The first couple of goals Carlton kicked, you could almost tear the rest of the roof off of the MCG. It was phenomenal. Yeah, look, you'd probably be made to rue your missed opportunities. I mean, 1-5 was, you definitely had your share of the ball in the first quarter, and that's probably where it finished off in the end. I mean, I think there was a shot from Wicks in there as he missed. Mills missed a gettable shot, and so did Amadi. So yeah, look, but I think tip of the hat, first of all, to Carlton for coming back the way they did. Everyone was on board the sack Michael Voss wagon mid-season. I'll put my hand up as well and say I was in the crowd as well, because flat out this team was so much better than, I think they were four wins, 8 losses, and a draw up
Mm-hmm.
to about round 14. But the manner that they sort of got out, and then they sort of stemmed the tide as well when the Swans pushed back, because we all knew the Swans were going to come back at some point in the second half, and they did. I think it's a testament to them, and really puts themselves in the box seat for Friday night against Melbourne. I genuinely think they can do it. They can get to the prelim.
Yeah, I'm 100% with you. It's with the struggles that Melbourne displayed offensively, and Carlton's big game hitters like Charlie Curnow. If the issue will be is how does Melbourne defend him with Lever and May? Well, it'll be fascinating. But this was just one of those where, and I kind of and I kind of want to go off this, is that this is the comeback kids of the finals, because both Carlton and Swan and Sydney both did the same thing. Both had the doldrums, rounds 14, 15, 16, and came roaring back at the end of the year. So this is one of those where it's like, momentum wise, when it came to the end of the year, these were probably the two teams outside of the 8 that had the most momentum coming into the finals. So I agree with you. It's Carlton, just they executed when they needed to, minus the Harry Mackay stuff. I felt horrible. I felt horrible for him, and then the injury, and I'm still trying to figure out how he concussed himself. I don't see where he got hit in the head. I didn't see any like vicious whiplash, so I'm just very interested on, was this something that maybe he already had kind of a head knock, and maybe this jolt that he took in this marking contest is what set it off, because he went from, I thought it was a rib issue originally, and then it's like all of a sudden he looked like he was drunk, and he could not walk straight, and I was like, oh god, that's not a good look. He's done for this game, he's done for next game. And I mean, if Carlton has a better offensive performance, could he be done the rest of the season? It's a fascinating thing to just look at, because if you look at their win streak, most of it was without him. Like, I think it was only the first 2 of the win streak actually had Harry Mackay. Most of the rest of the win streak did not have Harry Mackay because he was hurt. So Voss has got a few selection issues, especially, and I think Jack Martin's 1 game suspension could hurt Carlton a little bit more than Harry Mackay's, because who's going to come in for him? If Silvani is your come in, if he's healthy, that's the other thing I keep hearing is that he's not 100%. So will he be back is the main deal there. But I agree with you. I think Carlton is a red hot thought when it comes to their matchup against Melbourne coming up here in the semifinals. And unfortunately, then we go to the 2 games that were less than competitive, as GWS hand a nice little smacking down to St. Kilda, 101-77, a 4-goal win by the Giants. And Adam Kingsley, sir, take a bow, because if you are not coach of the year, it is a travesty.
You're spot on. Look, as a dog supporter, dogs and Giants fans, always have a tendency to sort of get on the nerves of one another. But from a dog supporter, I'm having a hell of a time watching the WS team play. So much more than my miserable mob who are just firing assistant coaches out the door quicker than any hot date I've ever had. So uh, they're a fun team to watch. The Giants. They're a great hard nosed team. they win these games on the road so consistently as well. That you see like a side like Richmond, for example. Damien Hardwick has a sook about not wanting to play at Marvel because he hates it and there's no soul. Uh, this GWS team led by Adam Kingsley is just like, I don't care. Just
Mhm.
just put whoever's in front of us and we'll run through them. The Orange Tsunami rides again. You know, they were fantastic. Guys like Tom Green who have just been it's having a standout year. Surprised he didn't get a spot in the All Australian team. He's been that good. Toby Green probably a down effort in comparison to previous weeks, but the guys around in that forward line. I mean, I saw great moments from Jake Riccardi. I saw Brent Daniels, who loves to stand up in a finals game. I keep thinking back to his 2019 finals campaign where it was so important to them as a small forward. And Toby Bedford, just he has no one talks about this guy, but I think he runs close as one of the recruits of the year
Mhm.
because he just runs the way that the team expects him to. Great on the lead, great goal sense, great pressure that he brings to this forward line. Can't get enough of the man that they call Snooze. So uh, they're a fantastic team to watch. Briggsy's been another one. Enjoyed watching his battle with Barge Marshall on the weekend. He was fantastic. And Jack Buckley's one-on-one efforts against Max King when Sam Taylor was a late scratching as well was a fun duel to watch.
Yeah, it's one of those where you almost kind of look at it and you go, if they can get Sam Taylor back, this team could even be a little bit better, which is kind of scary to think. This is a GWS team that has not had the probably one of the best defenders in all of the competition, not playing for several games, and they're still getting wins like this. So unfortunately, another dour performance by the Saints again. They were the least convincing finals side, honestly, in my opinion, going into this. And it was the reason I tipped this game. I did tip GWS. I knew there were some people that were saying, well, Ross will get his guys up and everything like that. GWS is just on too good a momentum right now. And they proved it right. And it was really fascinating again. And I think this is the GWS team that is very, very dangerous, especially knowing they get to go over to Port Adelaide and play Port when Port is very vulnerable. So natural progression here. Wasn't actually intending to make that a natural progression, but I mean, Brisbane Lions, a 48-point win over Port Adelaide, 123-75. Take me home, country road, being belted out after a goal and then having another goal kicked and then having to belt it out again. The atmosphere up at the Gabba was absolutely electric. It was insane. And if this grand final was being played at the Gabba, I think Brisbane Lions would be my tip. But the fact that it's at the G would be interesting. But this is a Brisbane Lions team right now that the only time they have to step foot outside of Queensland will be that grand final. How impressive were these Lions? Oh my gosh.
They 100% they were very impressive. I thought, particularly, Port really threw the hammer down at them. They threw everything they could in the first half, and then third quarter it was just bang, 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 bang. They put 8 goals on in nearly quick succession. I mean, Port had a couple in between there as well, but they're a fun team to watch when they get on a roll like this, Brisbane. And my main concern is that Gabba's a fortress. They play very well. Haven't lost a game this year,
Mhm.
but I just worry about what happens afterwards when they go to the MCG. Obviously, I think back to that game against Melbourne where Chris Fagan sort of had enough about that notion where they couldn't play at the MCG, and I thought that night they were actually quite good against Melbourne. They just fell away in the last 10 minutes, horrendously. So that's a big test for them. But they get the week off. They have the chance to refresh, recoup again, and go all again. But this Brisbane Lions team, I can see them getting to this grand final because at
Mhm.
Gabba, no, who beats them? Who beats Melbourne and Brisbane? Melbourne and Carlton. Sorry.
Yeah, I think the only one that would have a chance to beat them is Collingwood, and maybe Melbourne if they were full strength and not hurting without some of the guys that they are. But I mean, like I said, if this was the grand final at the Gabba, Brisbane would be absolutely loving it. It's the fact that the grand final game is at the MCG complicates the Brisbane's a little bit, their run just the littlest bit. So that is going to do it for the 4 games. I know it's so sad sometimes when it comes to finals because there's so few games to talk about, but each of these games have some interesting. But let's get to the topic that I think is on, well, I know just by looking at Twitter, is on everybody's minds, and that is the incident in the Melbourne game between Brandon Maynard, Bruz, as I keep hearing everybody, which confused me the first 5 minutes until I figured who's this Bruz? Everybody, oh yes, Brandon Maynard and Angus Brayshaw, and the bump that has the entire footy world split in a way I've only seen a couple of times. So I'll go with it, Alex. We've discussed this online. You know my opinion. I know yours. Again, a respectful discussion before we say the news because we already know his fate. And as I said off mic, I don't think his fate is 100%. I know that it has come down, but I know more. I think more is still to come if a few things go the way I think it is. So I want you to tell me, Alex, explain to me why this is a footy action and deserves no suspension. Let's suspend. I know we already know. Let's suspend before we found out. Our discussion we had previously, because you're very on the no suspension. I'm very on the I agree with the 3 game suspension. Let's have a respectful debate on this. Let's talk about this a little bit, and then we'll discuss a little bit after the result that has just come down as we were about to record. So, Alex, I'll let you have the floor first.
Oh, thanks, Donnie. Yeah, look, it's honestly, I can sort of see both sides of the argument, but
Mhm.
as someone who has played the game a fair bit over the journey, you're taught a fair few things. You're taught to not let the ball go past you by any means necessary in a finals game that's magnified to the nth degree. You've got to apply whatever pressure you got, and regardless of whether or not you do hit the mark or not, uh, that's almost an entirely different debate. I feel like, yeah, look, there's not, as soon as you jump up, there's not much you can do. But in that sort of circumstance, Bruzzy has every right to go up, jump up, arms up, and stop the ball from going forward inside 50. They end up getting a goal anyway. But if he, and the ball, and I don't think the ball was actually too far away from where his hands were. But unfortunately, what happens is what goes up has to come down. And I feel like it just almost feels like shit luck. And I apologize for the language. It feels like it's a bit shit luck when it comes to Gussie Brayshaw, who's probably the most susceptible bloke on the ground with concussion. You know, if you put someone who hasn't had as checkered a history of concussions as, say, maybe Max Gorn or potentially a Christian Petrarca, for example, I don't think he's
Mhm.
been concussed much. I think he walks off and he might not play at the game, but there's nothing else there that suggests that he's going to get stretched off, and it's made an entirely big deal. We talk about the outcomes based, sorry, the suspensions and the weeks that have resulted on the outcomes. It's probably that alone goes down from severe to high impact, and you might get maybe 2 weeks, and they take it to the tribunal anyway.
Mhm.
Um, yeah, it almost feels, my eyes, it feels like it's a football accident because he's charging towards the ball. He's making a play for the ball. He jumps up to try and make sure that he's given himself the best possible chance.
Mhm.
Unfortunately, he has to come down, and he's got the momentum on his side anyway. So he's going, and if you keep the hands up and Gussie's there, it leaves you a lot. It leaves you vulnerable as well as he is, and Gussie doesn't have enough time to brace it either. So either way, that both parties get hurt.
Mhm.
It's uh, and then taught at an early age to sort of brace for impact, and we all know that the head is sacrosanct and all that sort of stuff, but there has to be a line where the there has to be a line where you know accidents happen, and yeah, I understand your point, but from my point of view, it feels, and I've had moments where I haven't had enough of a run to make the contact, so I could grab somebody, but in a high stakes environment, where it's the speed is magnified 10,000 times to that of a
Mhm.
local level. Um, you know, I feel like Bruz should get off, and Yeah, that's it. That's all I got to
Mhm.
say. I think.
I understand that, and I completely, again, every argument that I've seen up until contact, I completely agree with everything that you say. Completely agree. Like that he's allowed to smother the ball. Absolutely. My only argument with that is that why do you have to jump to smother? You don't have to. Okay. So that's the only argument that I have with that particular part. My issue is with how he comes down. Okay. And again, this has divided the nation into many camps, unfortunately, and it is very frustrating because there's no discussion. There's you're a flog, you're an idiot. But then again, though, that's social media. My only issue that I have with it is when he comes down with arms fully extended over his head again, which unfortunately he comes nowhere near the ball. If you actually see the scoop still shot, it actually passes around his armpit. So it's fully past his arm. So he's actually in the air before the ball is actually 100% kicked. So that's the other thing too, that it kind of throws the argument is he was spoiling. Well, he comes nowhere close because he's actually in the air for the spoil before the ball is actually even kicked. The issue I have is when he comes down, he goes from arms above his head to arms into his chest. And everybody says it's a split second decision. And I made the same argument with Jordan DeGoey, as I kind of explained to you off mic, is everybody said Jordan DeGoey's hit on Elijah Hewitt in that game was a split second decision. No, it wasn't. He had already made his mind up to bump because his arms were in his chest before the ball is handballed. So this argument that he had no time to just tackle the man or to wrap him up was BS in the first place. And I think in some situations, for me personally, again, I'm not going to get heated in this because I think it's a waste of time and energy to do it. For me, I think he had enough time to get his hands extended out in front of him because he had enough time to pull him into his chest that he could have braced out, accepted Gussie, and then either hugged or pushed off. Gussie may have fallen to the ground, but neither would have been hurt. Neither would have been knocked out of the game. And he would have been perfectly fine. There would have been none of this discussion. But the fact that his decision wasn't to try to embrace and accept or push off, but to just go through what was going to happen is the part that I have a problem with. Do I think he was trying to hit Gus in the head? Do I think he was trying to hit Gus in the head? Absolutely not, because they were former teammates, and everything that I've seen, the reaction after is this was nothing intentional. But there is a point where you have to go. Even accidents sometimes need to be punished because if you want to be taken seriously about how you're handling concussion, this type of action has to be stamped out. Okay. I understand everybody's argument when it comes to football action. I really do, but this is not a football action. This is a decision that was made by the player on how they were going to embrace the impact. Personally, I know it's at full speed. I understand that, but these guys are fast twitch muscle athletes. They're used to making decisions at fast speed. I know all it makes it look so much worse in slow motion. I absolutely do. But even at full pace, if you watch it, he goes from above his head to in his chest in the same time frame that he could do half the distance of his arms and catch him and not hurt him. So that's my personal opinion on this. So now we'll get to it. The result has just come down. And if you go by winning the debate, Bryce Maynard has been freed. He's been cleared to play. He's been let off the charges. Again, I'm not going to be one of these people that's like, "Oh my God, this is a travesty." As I said to Alex before we started airing, I believe this is one the AFL will appeal. I know everybody was talking.
Oh, 100%.
If
100%.
if Brezzy Maynard would have been, if the suspension would have held there, then Collingwood would appeal, because this is one of those. I think the AFL I think they've drawn the proverbial line in the sand, and they're gonna. It's a little bit almost like Toby Green a couple years ago. They've set their opinion on what they think this is, and they're not going to let it go until they get to the absolute ends of what they can, which kind of stinks for Maynard because it's going to keep this debate going. But I know it. The AFL will appeal this. They will take it anywhere they can to maybe get this overturned because they've set the marker. They put the flag in the ground that they believe that this is it, and that's the way it's going to go. Am I happy for Buzz Maynard? Absolutely. It would have sucked to miss out on the finals, especially this season, especially with a rule that I've stated numerous times. I don't get why only the guys that play on grand final day get a premiership medal, because I don't know about you, Alex, but have you ever seen any team sport where only the guys that play on the day of winning a championship are only the people that help you win a title? Because I've never seen it. And in fact, I probably could go through the annals of history in the AFL and probably could point out several years where the 18 guy or 22 or however many guys that play on grand final day are not the only guys that have donned a Guernsey for that season, personally.
Yeah, that's an interesting debate in itself, Donnie. We could be here till the till the early hours of the morning, or in your case, the early hours of the early hours of the afternoon. But yeah, this is it's interesting, isn't it? I mean, look, I've always been someone for traditional, somewhat of a traditionalist. I always like the idea of the 22 that plays on the day they get the premiership medals. But I get your point as well,
Mm-hmm.
because as an example, Bob Murphy in 2016,
Mm-hmm.
if he didn't do his knee, and if he didn't do his knee, he'd be a premiership winning captain. And it was great for Luke Beveridge. As much as I have issues with the bloke currently, it's a great sentiment because he is a big part of the football club. Um, so yeah, look, that's something I'm quite split on. But um, yeah, look, on the Bros decision, look, we could go all on and on all night about the all the angles. I don't get me started on his brother for claiming it's a big conspiracy theory to set up Collingwood for a premiership. It could be the most haphazard, dumbass take I've ever heard in my life.
I would agree with
Uh,
that. I would agree with
Um,
that 100%. This
and,
this conspiracy theory on the AFL. I'm like, seriously, the AFL, if they worried about who buttered their bread, they wouldn't be doing a conspiracy theory against one of the biggest clubs in the entire country. It is ignorance upon ignorance on that one.
yeah.
There trust me, there are interstate club supporters that will literally look at you and go, if you think the AFL is trying to screw a Victorian club, you have issues.
Oh, 100%. And for all the stuff that I do, and the guys that I work with on the A3 Footy podcast as well. We do our best to make sure the interstate clubs get a good lick of the cherry when we analyze them and whatnot, and talk about what's going on with them. So we see it, and a lot of the feedback that we get is like, oh, so refreshing to get feedback from bloody Victorians. Uh, to to talk about interstate clubs. So no, that's yeah. I feel for the interstate fans a fair bit, because we know that the AFL was originally a Victorians game, a Victorian league. So there's always going to be that notion that lingers over, as long as the day goes on. So look, there's no doubt that, back to the Maynard incident, I still think that, yeah, you're right. The AFL will take this on board, because what has happened, before they deliberated and sent him to the tribunal, I think the story went, the match review officer, Michael Christian, wanted to throw it off as a football act, but Laura Kane, who is now, I think, just been recently appointed as the head of football
Mhm.
operations. I think she took the job that was previously vacated by Brad Scott.
Mhm.
She's had a big say in it and said, no, let's take it to the tribunal. Let's get all the due processes out. So it almost sounds like to me that the AFL do want to hand Brozzy a suspension of some sort, whether or not it's 3+ weeks, or if it's 1 week, or maybe it's 6,000 weeks. I
Mhm.
don't entirely know, um, but uh, there's no doubt the AFL want to set a precedence that the head is indeed sacrosanct, and it does sort of get on my goat a little bit that we do penalise the outcomes before, rather than the actions.
Mhm.
If that was the case, Tom Lynch should have been suspended for his bump on Alex Keith earlier in the year.
Agree.
That as much as I thought he could have done more to avoid that, they've class that as an accident. You know, if we want to be even more far fetched and ridiculous, what about Gary Rowan knocking out his own teammate about a month and a half ago?
I remember that, and somebody even specifically said it. They said if he was wearing a different jumper, he'd have got 2 weeks, and it kind of shows you how farcical sometimes they kind of handle this whole thing. It's like it
Yeah,
is. I don't like the result based suspensions. It should be
yeah,
action based. If a guy tags a guy in the head, whether intentional or not, suspend him. And the worst part about it is they won't make it black and white. Like that's the frustrating part. Like I'll take you out of Australian sports and come over here to the States. What annoys the crud out of me is when they suspend via who you are. So AK I'll put it into AFL terms. If a Clayton Oliver, if a Dangerfield, if a actually Dangerfield's kind of a bad kind of a perfect situation is that many people were like it was a his suspension that he had for cracking the Adelaide guy a few years ago. If you're a superstar, you tend to get a more lenient one because everybody wants to see you. But if you're a grub, if you're a halfway down the list type of player that most people don't know, and you do something that Dangerfield did, you're going to get 4, 5, 6, 7 weeks because you're you're expendable. You're not somebody that's going to get bums on seats or bring in money, which frustrates the heck out of me because you're basically telling the superstars, yeah, you can get away with it. You're fine. You're a superstar. You're fine with that. If you make it black and white, honestly, I think you stamp it out much easier. It's like, hey, you hit the head, you're done for a game. You hit the head and we can tell you did it intentionally, you're done for 3. Plain and simply, you know the rules. You step onto the field. You know what the actions are going to go in. Now you get to make the decision. Do you do it or not? And will they do it? Probably not, because I mean, who would want to miss who would want to miss the chance to see Clayton Oliver because Clayton Oliver the game before decided I'm going to go in for a bump and accidentally collect this guy in the head. Now he doesn't do it intentionally, but he's going to get a game because he hit a guy in the head.
yeah, absolutely. Even if you want to go back to last year, Paddy Cripps was originally done for 2 weeks
He
for
still
that
should have
hit that
never
knocked.
got off. He never should have got off. I'm sorry, Blues
Uh,
fans. He never should have got
absolutely.
off. He got off on a technicality. He won a Brownlow on a technicality. You are not going to convince me otherwise. This is not me going against a Victorian team. This is not me going against Carlton because I have many a good Carlton fan. He deserved 2 weeks. Callum Archie got concussed because he decided that he needed to jump in a non-marking contest. I'm sorry, I don't care. I will make my opinion very known on that. And I said at the time, he deserved weeks. He got off on a technicality, and I'm angry at the AFL for making that blunderous mistake because it literally set a very bad precedent a little bit, not only and the fact that again that how can you make that idiotic a clerical error? Sorry.
Yeah. Oh no, don't apologize, mate. This is your show. So, no, look, I agree. As far as I'm concerned, it's a tainted Brownlow medal, and Blues. I'm already in hot water with Blues fans for telling them to calm down on Friday night because they only just won one final. You got to win another 3,
Mhm.
but yeah, I just sort of, I do sort of say as well. It's like you can't. It's one of those things. Like you got to set a tone somewhere. And the thing is though, with what's an accident and what's not here with the tribunal match review officer, as a player, you'd feel so bloody confused about what's going on.
Mhm.
It's still not black and white as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah, 100% agree with you on that. You are not going to get any argument with that. And I understand that the players get confused because again, some things are adjudicated one way and some things are adjudicated just a little bit different. Okay, so let's move on. We could talk about that particular topic and everything involved with it forever, but again, I like keeping it civil. I like keeping it as respectful as possible. I appreciate the debate, Alex. It's been so much fun, but let's move on. I'm a little.
we'll be here longer than the bloody tribunal, mate.
Exactly. It's over 3 hours and it's still going with the Martin one as we speak. As we were kind of saying, the Martin one is currently on the docket. Let's jump to it. I'm a little concerned, sir. Two teams that are playing in these semifinals, I think, should be a little worried. So, which of Melbourne or Port is in the most danger of seeing their season over in straight sets?
I think both of them are in danger, and I don't know. I can't really split it. There's different reasons here. With Melbourne, they've got their forward issues, and we've sort of already touched on it. Van Royen's not going to play. They've accepted their 1 week suspension.
Mm.
Uh, they need Todd McDonald to play the game of his life on Friday night if the D's are to get anywhere, really. And I don't know who comes in. Whether or not, I don't think Brody Grundy's the answer. I think, as far as I'm concerned, these papers are stamped. He's going to go elsewhere next year because it just hasn't worked. Do I want to see someone like Josh Shackey come in? Well, look, as a dog supporter, no. I don't think you. I think you're basically throwing the game away at that point if you're playing him. With Port, it's different because GWS are in sensational form. They've continued on from their form at the end of the year to the finals. That week off is always sort of separated really, really good teams to also rounds in respect. It sort of gets everyone back at square one. And last week, I thought the Giants, particularly in that second quarter, and in respect in the last quarter as well, I thought they were bloody terrific with how they moved the ball at times and how they did it and how they just won the game. On the back of that. So Port's an interesting one. I have more faith in Port to bounce back than Melbourne, but as far as I'm concerned, they're both in danger, if that makes sense.
For me, I'm gonna flip it around. I know Melbourne has all the offensive issues that they do, but Carlton again, it's can Max Gawn make an impact? Because if he can take away Carlton's bread and butter, which is their contested footy and their clearance footy, I think there will be enough wear on the Carlton defenders that I think you could get a couple out the back, you could get a couple of cheap goals, and you can actually probably grind out a win. Port Adelaide is the one I'm scared for because they have injury after injury after injury on their back line. Like, who's gonna guard who? Who's gonna come in? Because Jonas is out now. McKenzie, I think, is fighting injury. So it's like, if I'm Port, not only do you have to face one of the underrated great bigs of this year in Kieran Briggs in the ruck against Scooter, who I think came back, but I mean, it was more of just to give him some size in the ruck battle because you knew Oscar McInerney was going to dominate them if they tried to go any other way. I'm more worried for Port because I think Port is running into an absolute buzzsaw in GWS. Sam Taylor could be much more healthy, which means they're already weakened forward. They're already weakened forward line with Chaz Dixon still not being 100%. Just would get better. So for me, it's GWS. I think GWS is the team. Port is the most in danger because GWS comes in absolutely in fuego. And even over in Adelaide, I think this is a super dangerous game for the Power here. So I don't know, but well, we'll have to see. It'll be fascinating. Both of these semifinal games could be absolute belters for sure. And then I've heard everybody say this ever since pretty much the Brisbane game has been over with. Is it inevitable? Is a Brisbane Collingwood grand final inevitable?
I don't think it's as inevitable as everyone's asking. I mean, I think look, Brisbane's always is a very, very tough task. Probably one of the hardest tasks in football this year, maybe.
Mhm.
But we've seen it, in the past. I just asked the Dogs of a couple of years ago who went up to the Gabba. I don't think they'd won a game at the Gabba. I think it's 2017, so they hadn't won there for a few years. So they got up there and they got the job done. Some will argue that we use the umpires as an excuse, as an out. I've always maintained that it's a big fat myth. It's a lie, but it's a dog supporter talking, so
Mhm.
don't take that with a grain of salt. Um, but look, no, it's. I don't think it's as clear cut as it is. Even Collingwood, in a respect, that last quarter very, very wobbly. If GWS get through Port Adelaide this week and take on the Pies at the MCG, we all know what happened last time they played in the prelim final of the MCG. Those two teams, the Giants got the job done from, I think they were sixth. I think they finished that year.
Mhm.
So there's not a doubt in my mind that I don't think it's that clear cut.
I'm 100% with you, and it's more of the Collingwood side of the argument that I'm sketchy on, because again, that GWS team, that they're road warriors. They don't mind playing on the road. I think Collingwood is still a little bit susceptible, and that would be Nick Dacos's first game back. And with some physicality, you just never know. It'll be fascinating. I think the inevitable side, honestly, I don't think whoever wins between Melbourne and Carlton are going to come in at all favorites. I think Brizzy and on that Gabba deck, I, I, Melbourne could somewhat compete. I worry that Carlton's defensive woes would be like Brisbane will be licking their chops if Carlton knocks off Melbourne, because I think it is a perfect matchup for Brisbane to get to a grand final. So I think honestly, sitting here looking at it, I think the only inevitable part, honestly, that I would look at, and again, footy is footy, so you just never know, would be Brisbane getting to a grand final, because I don't see Melbourne or Carlton having the horses to be able to knock them off. But you never know. It's footy. Crazier stuff has happened. So, and then the
Yeah,
last,
just ask me. Just ask me and my team.
pretty much. I mean, pretty much. So, and then the last one I have is, can either Carlton or GWS defy the odds and win a premiership?
Oh, it's a really tough one. I don't know if they can go all the way to win it. I think the Giants are probably more likely to get to a grand final than Carlton are. But having said that, I still don't think the Giants are sort of at that level where Brisbane are at. Collingwood at their best. If that, you mentioned Dacos before, he comes back into this side for the first time, and we know the Giants are a very good sort of contested outfit, very tough and rugged whenever they can get the ball in their terms. Can Nick Dacos stand up to that? When he's back first game in nearly 2 months,
Mm-hmm.
I'm not entirely sure. If it does happen, then Collingwood certainly has the chops to go all the way. But yeah, look, to answer your question, I think no. I certainly look. As much as I've been impressed with Carlton the second half of this year, especially GWS as well, I think Brisbane and Collingwood are probably just a little bit above them.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think if either, I think GWS, because I think they have the better shot of getting to the grand final. I know everybody's like, they're on Collingwood's side of the bracket if they win. I know, but Collingwood's still vulnerable, and that would be Nick Dacos' first game back. So there's going to be a little bit of rust. So GWS I think, has got the better shot to get to the grand final, but I think if it's a GWS Brisbane grand final, Brisbane will be laughing all the way to the bank, because I think it's going to be, there's that four-headed monster that is the Brisbane Lion forward line would just have a field day. So I'm with you. I don't think they have a chance to win the premiership, but I think GWS has got the better shot of getting to the grand final, because I think Carlton's got to go through the GABA, which has just been an absolute house of horrors for any team going up to Queensland. So that is it for my burning questions. We'll jump to it. We'll preview the semifinals. We have 2 games this week, so I'll remind everybody there won't be a podcast next week, just because 2 games, unless there's a huge amount of news coming out. I think we'll be able to wait on it, and then we will go through the semis, the prelims, and preview the grand final in our next episode. So let's talk about it, sir. Carlton v Melbourne, Friday night, a few highlights, and then who do you think survives and moves on to play the Brisbane Lions in the preliminary final?
Yeah, it'll be interesting. This will be their third meeting this year, and I think both of them were quite ugly games. And only reason people talk about the last game was because of the the arc decision that saw Christian Petrarca a goal. So take that as you will. It's going to be a close game, no doubt about that. I've got questions about Max Gawn, Clayton Oliver. They're both carrying some injury niggles during the week, but Simon Goodwin says they're both fine. So um, nothing to worry about there as far as he's concerned. But I can see Melbourne losing in straight sets again, unless they find a solution. Ben Brown fit. If he's fit, I think they need to play him. But I'm worried about the lack of match fitness that he has.
Mhm.
If that's the case, Josh Shackey's had a good run at it. I think Casey's still in the fight. Oh no, they're not.
No, they got beat. They got
Yeah,
absolutely
yeah,
smashed.
that's right. They got absolutely smashed. So yeah, look, I'd say get him in. He's got the match fitness. He knows the system well. You know, if he's good for a goal or two, that helps. We're not asking Josh Shackey here to be a match winner with 5 goals against an informed Carlton team. We just need him to do his bit. But yeah, the midfield battle will be interesting. And I think the battle as well will be interesting as well. We saw Blake Acres on Friday night play one of his best games. I think the
Mhm.
way he just moved the ball around, his decisiveness, his precision with the ball in hand as well was quite good at stages as well. I was a bit worried about Ed Langdon. He was, for lack of a better term, uh, shat himself whenever it went ball. Um, and Lockie Hunter, I've had my criticisms about him for a long, long time. I think he's another one who sort of likes to be flashy, but when the chips are down, he sort of dissolves a fair bit. So, um, I think Carlton win for mine.
Okay. All right. I every single thing that you said, I think Blake Acres, I think if you ask some Swans fans, they wish his fingers were about half an inch shorter. After the two touch throughs, and then I found it interesting that a few Crows fans online were like, why is Longmire sucking about the goal review? No, he simply asked a question, he answered it, he didn't suck. He basically said, did he think it was good enough? No. But again, that's kind of the way it goes. I mean, you got to admit, Sydney can't really complain too much. They were on both sides of this particular event when it comes to umpire decisions and the arc and everything like that. And I didn't say a word about it because I thought, you know what, there's no win. There's no win in that particular comment. So uh,
Yeah,
when it comes to it, I'm with you. I'm tipping Carlton. I don't like Melbourne's mojo. I think they showed some frailties in that game against Collingwood that they haven't shown all year long. I don't like it. I think Carlton's on the buzz in the city, scrolling through Twitter and all of the Carlton fans that are like, I got my tickets. This is going to be mental. There's going to be close to 100,000 people for this game on Friday. I think it's going to be mostly Carlton. And I think they're going to be loud. I think they're going to be boisterous. I think this is going to be a cracking game. I just think the loss of Harry, it'll be interesting. The Martin decision, I don't think has come down yet that I have seen. Let me double check for sure. You may get it a little bit faster than me, but but
no, I've got nothing at the moment, so
yeah,
they're
neither
still
do
going.
I. Yeah, I was just checking it myself, and it's been a while since so they must still be accepting evidence. But I mean, I think if Silvani is fit enough and Silvani comes in, I honestly think it makes Carlton harder to defend because they become less predictable without the two big guys again. Harry Mackay, all the best. I hope he's healthy as quickly as possible. But I think this may be a blessing in disguise for Carlton. I think they become that much more dangerous going forward. I think the Blues win this one. I hate seeing Melbourne go out in straight sets, but I don't like their mojo right now. I think Carlton is much, much more improved than I was expecting. So I have to see, can the Blues get themselves to a preliminary final? And the other one on Saturday night sees the GWS Giants go to Port Adelaide again. The Road Warriors, can they do it again? I asked this. Who do you like in this one? What's your thought process? And who is going to be playing Collingwood in the preliminary final?
Yeah, this is going to be an interesting game. These two teams not too long ago, really, and I think Port absolutely tailed them up. So it's a big game for Port in particular, who had some really shocking moments. I think Todd Marshall is one that needs to stand up, particularly if Charlie Dixon doesn't get up with his bung knee. So yeah, the forward line is. I can't get a read of their forward line, to be honest. I think they've got the good tools there. You know, they need Finlayson to play really well. They need Willie Rioli to kick 2 or 3 goals to get up. But As I said earlier, this GWS team is just fun to watch. They bring a blend of density. They bring great offensive flair. They're defensively very good. And they've got a ruckman in Kieran Briggs who, I said about 5 years ago, this kid can play. The only downside was he wasn't, as multi-tooled as some of the other ones, like a Tim English, for example, who could cover the ground and who could get some, you know, touches of the ball. He was purely tap first, but he has done so well to build on his craft that he's become the man in the ruck stocks at GWS. So yeah, it's a tough one. It's a really really tough one. The midfield, Rosie Butters. Francis will probably get some minutes in there as well against the likes of Green, Stephen Canelio, Josh Lee was really, really good. Yeah, yeah, tough one. Really, really tough one. Um, I want to say GWS because I'm more confident in them getting the chocolates in, but it almost, yeah, I will say the Giant up, but I'm not going to count Port out this by any means. I thought they've got a lot to prove. If they get out in straight sets, the decision to re-sign Ken Hinkley to 2 years before the season's played out almost sort of intensifies a fair bit for mine.
Mhm. Yep, definitely for sure. It'll be interesting to see how that goes. But I'm with you. I am with you. I think GWS win this one. I think this is a different Port team than when they played a little bit earlier, for sure. I'm going to be fascinated to see how things go because there could be quite the uproar in South Australia if both Port go out in straight sets. So it'll be fascinating to see. So really quickly, I have to ask, did you do a bracket and who did you have winning the entire thing? And do you think they'll survive this round?
Um, we actually did something on the podcast a while back, just sort of predicting who made the top, who finished in the top eight. I think this was mid-season, and it was completely wrong because I think I had the Dogs, Essendon, Geelong, and Richmond all in the top eight, and none of them did. So that completely threw everything out of whack. But if we're going on what we've tipped, so that means we get a Collingwood Giants game in the prelim and get Brisbane and Carlton. So I think Brisbane are too good for Carlton. So they get to the grand final, and I think Collingwood, get over GWS at the MCG, and I think that leads to the Pies getting it done. So I think probably. I don't think it has changed from mid-season when we
Mhm.
did that bracket, but yeah, I think the Pies probably be a bit tougher. But geez, if any team can get them to believe it, but it has to be Craig McRae, right?
Mhm. Yeah, the only different subset that I would see from be GWS because I think GWS has got a lot of positive momentum. I think Collingwood is still a little iffy, and if that's Dacos's first game, I think you could somewhat capitalize on it. So I'm throwing it out there. It wouldn't shock me if I see a GWS Brisbane Grand Final, but I mean, I'm not gonna hold my breath either because Port is not an easy place to play, and then Collingwood with Collingwood Army behind them would be, I mean, that would be two impressive wins to get to a grand final for sure. But it'll definitely be fascinating. So, ladies and gentlemen, that is going to do it for the podcast. Again, a ton of stuff to talk about. And I have to say this, Alex, this was a great conversation. I truly appreciate it. I love having a good old fashioned respectful discussion when it comes to it, especially when people can understand both sides. Because as we kind of discussed offline when it comes to it, that sometimes social media can be quite the toxic trash can. So they aren't always good for good, intelligent, thoughtful discussion on differences when it comes to thought processes on things. So I truly appreciate not only the respectful discussion, but for you hopping on the podcast and covering the footy with me.
Always a pleasure talking with you, Donnie. And yeah, likewise. I enjoyed a sensible discussion about football. Geez, Lord knows I've had my fair share of crook people coming on and telling me I know nothing or make cracks about whatever.
Hmm.
I'm only here just I'm only here just talking about football. If I'm saying Luke Beveridge should be sacked, don't have my head on a spit. Uh,
Unfortunately, there are some people that react a little more emotionally than others, unfortunately. But it's
Yeah.
one of those. I will have a discussion with you, but as soon as name calling or as soon as questioning of my intelligence comes out, then I have a little bit of a problem with it because everybody can have an opinion. I'm one of those that if you have an opinion that you can articulate in a way is even better. If you have an opinion and your opinion is it and you nobody else knows anything, then it's not a discussion, it's just you giving an opinion and not actually taking in any other information at all. So this has been absolutely fascinating. I love the conversation, and this is always great to sit down and have a chat with you, sir. So that is going to do it for our episode. Thank you so much for listening. Again, keep an eye out. We will be off this next week with only the semis, but we will be back to cover the semis, prelims, and talk about the grand final. AFLW round two review will be out very, very soon. I have a very fun guest, a very good friend of the podcast, hopping on as my co-host there. Continued AFLW coverage and State League grand final reviews of the VFL, Waffle, and Sample still to come before this footy season is over. Thank you so much for listening, and I will be back with another episode of Donnie's Disposals very, very soon.
Here's the song.